Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Jon Jasniak. Jon Jasniak is a land investor and entrepreneur who has done over 700 land deals and has bought and sold 7,000 acres. An engineer by trade, Jon grew a $10 million business from scratch, focused around land. Most recently, he bought a small unincorporated town in Texas called Carnudos. Jon, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Kendall. Excited to be here talking to other land folks. It's my favorite type of podcast to do. So hopefully I can provide a bunch of value for people and looking forward to answering some questions.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you. I've been wanting to interview you for quite some time now. I see you all over social media about your small town in Texas, Carnudos. So very excited to hear more about that. Let's just start with, how did you get started in doing land deals?
So I found out about it on a podcast. I reference this podcast all the time. Side Hustle Show, episode 108. Our friend Mark Podolsky of the Land Geek was on there talking about land investing. This would have been late 2016. I was engineering, drilling oil wells at that time in South Texas, going to and from the rig, listening to a bunch of podcasts, found out about it. And it wasn't the first business I was trying to start. I didn't really like the corporate world too much. And I was like, this sounds pretty cool. So he really attracted me with the passive income potential of it. And funny enough, 90% of my sales nowadays are owner finance, and I hold a bunch of notes. So found out about it on a podcast, bought his course, bought the Land Academy course, jumped in pretty much immediately. Within a month or two, I bought my first piece in the Gunsight Ranch in Hudspeth County. It would have been 53 acres for $8,500. Bought it from some wholesaler in Florida, and it already came broken out in 5 separate lots of like 10.6 acres, and I sold all of those within like a month and doubled my money. So I immediately started scaling up and buying a bunch of 10, 20, 40 acre lots in Texas, a lot of West Texas stuff. I went to Texas Tech and have done a lot of drilling and oil field work and stuff in West Texas. So I was kind of just naturally gravitated towards it. And next thing I know, it snowballed from there, and now it's kind of turned into basically doing these large subdivisions outside of city limits. And then, of course, you mentioned buying Cornutus, which has taken up a lot of my time and energy recently. But so yeah, it's basically grown from zero, plowed all my engineering capital into the business, and has grown from there, multi 7 figures.
Absolutely incredible. Now, you started with, you mentioned Hudspeth County. I'm very familiar with Hudspeth County. I think a lot of us got started out there, because
Nice.
it's right, desert squares. And so, what can you sort of pinpoint, what was that very first deal that you were like, okay, I'm not in that Hudspeth Desert Square area anymore. Like, this is some serious, serious money that we're talking about here.
My first one that wasn't a desert square.
Yeah.
It was probably one of my first subdivisions. It would have been 2019 in the Lubbock area. I went to Texas Tech, which is obviously Lubbock, Texas, and I bought 160 acres out there for, I think it was like 250,000 or so, and we ended up selling all that for, I think, probably 750,000 or so, just 10-acre minor subdivision. That was kind of my first real subdivision, I guess you would call it, and first deal that wasn't a desert square. But I made a lot of money out in the desert, if I'm being honest. Like, my first real subdivision was actually Hudspeth County, where I bought 534 acres for 40 grand. Some dude was going bankrupt, and I got it for like $78 per acre, and just made a bunch of 10-acre lots out there. Just did one of those classic old paper plats, didn't carve any roads, got exempted basically. I'm not sure it's technically correct to do it that way, especially nowadays. I know they're cracking down a lot more out there in Hudspeth, but that one I ended up selling it all for like over 300,000. So it was almost 10x my money, but I guess it was still in the desert. So I don't know if that counts.
No, it definitely counts. That's incredible. Now, you mentioned subdivides. Is that what your main specialty is now, or what is your, like, what types of land deals are you specializing in these days?
Yeah, it's mostly subdividing. I'd say 90%. Every now and then I get something passed across my desk. Like, I'm doing one right now out in Ward County, Texas, a couple of 3 10-acre lots. Well, 2 10s, 120 for 25K. And I think, they're probably worth like 60 or 70. So I'm not going to say no to a deal like that, but most of it's subdividing just because I don't really like messing around with the small stuff anymore. It's a lot of time, energy, especially because I'm owner financing a lot of it. So the default rate obviously is a lot higher on those lots in the middle of nowhere. I manage all my own notes. I have a pretty small team. So I want to get the most bang for my buck. And the best way for anyone, for all of you listening, to scale, in my opinion, is obviously subdividing. I think you want to get there as quickly as possible, because you can do one subdivision and it's going to take the place of like 10, or not 10, probably 100 small little flips. Do one subdivision, probably 100 small little flips if it's a decent sized subdivision. So that's what I'm focusing most of my time and energy on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, you mentioned that you started doing, your subdividing wasn't your very first type of deal that you did, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone's listening to this and they're used to like maybe flipping small infill lots, maybe even just wholesaling some lots here and there, and they want to get into subdividing, but it sounds really daunting to them. They're really scared about it or really apprehensive about it. Can you walk us through like what your mindset was and how you overcame those challenges, if you had challenges, in moving from the traditional flip model to subdividing?
Yeah, for sure. I remember that first one out in Hudspeth, 40,000. I mean, I was scared because that was my biggest purchase to date, 40K. I was asking my dad. I think he ended up giving me 35K to borrow at 0% interest. He refused any interest or anything back from me. I was like, dude, just let me pay you something. I made like 300 G's on this thing. But for the beginner, I always say this all the time. You have to start small. So your first subdivision is probably going to be a minor subdivide. Find something that has great access. You can carve it up with just a simple survey, and 50,000, 25, 50, 100,000, keep it six figures or less. And some of your bigger infill lots or bigger desert squares or whatever, you probably spending 20, 30 G's on those anyway. So find a subdivision of similar cost and start with a minor subdivide. I would never really recommend starting with major subdivisions because can be very complicated. I'm dealing with several right now, and it's just working with the counties and doing the whole 9 yards, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But like, start with the minor stuff. It's so easy. Just get it surveyed off, make sure you're hitting all the plat exemptions and good access, and start there and do one or two of those, because even those, it could be multi six-figure deals.
Right. Now, for someone that's never done a subdivide deal that's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm all sold. I want to do minor subdivides. I can definitely see what the value is in that. How do they tell what's a minor subdivide, what's a major subdivide, and how do you decide what each property is going to be as you come across them?
So I think when it comes down to minor and major subdivides, a lot of it is going to have to do with access. Each county is going to have their own regulations. It's mainly done at the county level. So if you're working Hudspeth County, you would simply Google Hudspeth County subdivide regulations, and they're going to have a PDF. So I immediately, whatever potential deal, I go to the county, I pull the PDF, I do a quick scan, I call the commissioner's court or planning and zoning or whoever handles the subdivisions out there. Sometimes it's road and bridge. It just depends on the county. Call them up, talk to them about platting exemptions. I usually hit them with my specific project that I'm doing. Sometimes I'll even email them a Google Earth screenshot with how I plan to break it out. That way they can see exactly what I'm talking about. And I ask them, what sort of platting, if any, is going to be involved in this? Are you going to make me build a road, etc.? Which the whole purpose of doing a minor subdivide is each lot has road access, and a lot of times there's going to be a specific acreage point. A lot of times it's 10 acres, sometimes it's 5, depends on the county and state that you have to be above. A lot of counties in Texas, for instance, you keep it above 10 acres, you give them all public access points. Sometimes you can even do flagpole strips on different lots, flag lots, to hit public access points, keep it above 10 acres, and you don't have to do anything with the commissioner's court. All you do is run out a surveyor, and I just record. I have them plat it all out and create a plat index of all the different lots laid out on paper. And then I have them create a plat map for each individual lot. And then I will record the specific lot's plat and the plat index behind every deed. So if I sell off lot 1, you'll see lot 1's plat plus the plat index behind the deed. Nothing ever happens with the county. So minor subdividing, basically what you need to know, hit a certain acreage point, but mainly public access to every single lot. So you're going to be basically looking for a deal that has a long road front, or a square or rectangle shape with the road touching alongside, is how I like to think about it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, um, you mentioned that obviously you are doing subdivides and you're also offering an owner finance. Can you kind of talk us through a little bit about like what your business model is?
Yeah, so what I'm kind of heavily focused on right now is buying with seller financing and selling with owner financing. So that's how I kind of distinguish the two. A lot of people call both sides seller financing, owner financing, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but what I call it seller financing when I'm buying with the seller, owner financing when I'm selling to my buyers. That's kind of how I distinguish it. I like to buy with seller financing, give them 10 to 20% down, control a piece of land, allow myself to subdivide and sell all or part of it to my customers. I utilize wraparound notes and owner finance it to a lot of my customers. Now, sometimes I work with private investors. Sometimes if the deal is good enough, I'll actually pay cash for it up front. I don't like working with banks just because of the friction and paperwork, and they don't like wraparounds a lot of times. Now they'll let you sell it off for cash, like smaller parcels for cash, but it's pretty hard to find a lender that allows wraps. And if they do, they just create a lot of friction with their attorneys and paperwork and all that stuff. So that buying subdivides, preferably with seller financing, certainly with some kind of financing. It's rare that I buy it cash, but if the deal's good enough, I will. It all comes down to hitting my economic metrics. I like to think of it in terms of yield or IRR, internal rate of return. It's got to be 100% or higher on any of these subdivides that I do. And that dictates what sort of funding, am I paying cash? What can I do with it, etc. It's a great way to leverage your money if you're getting it on seller financing. I'm a little upset because I had an offer out for 150 acres in West Texas today. I offered them, it has a house on it too, by the way. It's like a 4,000 square foot custom built house. I offered them 500,000 down and 600,000 on a 10-year amortization with a 3-year balloon. And they're asking 1.25. I offered them 1.1 with financing. Basically, they told me, no, we don't want to sell their financing anything, even though when we went and saw the house a couple of days ago, they're like, yeah, we would entertain seller financing. Then when I actually made the offer, he's like, no, I want all cash. So they're like, prepare something that's like about 1.1 million cash and we think you'll get it done. And so kind of contemplating, obviously I'm not going to spend that cash of my own. Do I want to use a bank? Do I want to use a private guy? So yeah.
Got it. So, in terms of raising money for these deals, like if you're not going through a bank, you're going through a private lender. How do you go about raising funds for your deals?
What I've kind of been fascinated by here recently is getting a private lender who understands the business, offering them 12 to 18% interest and basically having them step into the seller's shoes. So any seller who won't finance me, I'll say, hey, private money guy, let me give you 10 to 20% down. So your loan to value is, favorable and you have a good, you feel comfortable with your collateral. We're probably buying it for 250. You're holding the note of 200. It's probably worth 300 right off the top. So, if Jazz Land doesn't perform or I don't perform with a private money person, they feel comfortable like, okay, I can go and resell this piece of land. And then I offer them 12 to 18% interest. And I found a lot of people were interested in that in the, $200,000 to $500,000 range for a private investor because they like the monthly cash flow. It's just one note from a solid performing payer, my company. Alternatively was pretty common in the land space. I think we all know is to go have someone fund the deal and like split profits 50-50 or something like that, whatever your determined profit split is. That's great for a beginner. And I'd certainly recommend doing that. The reason why is because you're not on the hook for any debt. So as a beginner, go out and find a private money guy, create a nice little PowerPoint pitch, what you think, the comps are, how you're going to sell it, how quick it's going to sell, know all of your numbers and create a little pitch to them and ask them to fund the whole deal and split profits. That way you don't have any debt. As a beginner, I do not recommend utilizing debt, because anything can happen. Let's be honest. Now, as someone who's more experienced, I like to use debt because now I don't have to give up 50% of the profits. Like on this deal, that's worth 3 million, let's call it, and I'm buying it for 1.1 after improvements, probably going to make 1.5 million net. I'd rather not give up 750,000 to someone funding it. I'd much rather just pay someone 18% interest and have interest payments and carry debt because obviously I'm going to make a lot more money on the backside. So that's more of an advanced technique that I utilize. But as a beginner, have someone fund all your deals, split the profits 50-50. You're going to make a bunch of money. And then when you're in a position to utilize debt, try to switch over to a debt model, in my opinion, as quickly as possible. At 12 to 18%, I think is pretty fair in the private market.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. And so if someone's listening to this, they're a beginner, they're saying, okay, well now I truly and wholeheartedly believe in the power of having a private investor, and I want to get a private lender. So how do they go about doing that?
Facebook groups. That's why I tell everyone all the time, your Facebook group, my Facebook group, the Land Academy group, the Land Geek group. There's so many different Facebook groups out there. Just go to your Facebook search bar, type in land flipping, land investing, toggle to groups, join all the groups with, 1,000, 2,000 plus members. And you're going to actually see people posting in there, such as some of the people talked about at the beginning of this call, that they fund deals. I see people posting in those groups all the time how they fund deals. So just create yourself a little spreadsheet list, start building a little contact sheet of everyone who funds those deals. And then boom, when you get one, now you just create your little pitch deck or, PowerPoint or underwriting sheet, whatever you have, and just reach out to all of those funders on your list.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really, really good. Um, Let me ask you, so you mentioned that you are, obviously creating notes on this whenever you're selling your individual parcels. Do you hold those notes? Do you sell those notes? What's the percentage of the ones that you sell? What does that look like?
So I probably hold 80% plus of them. My notes receivable now, I try not to ever disclose the exact number, but it's in the multi-million range. I use the mortgage office to manage it all. People paying me monthly, over 100 people paying me monthly. And every time I need to raise capital or anytime, really, I try not to sell notes too often, but if I need capital, if I got more projects coming, if I feel like, I'm not liking the economy, or I just want to hold a little more cash, there's could be several different factors. I'd kind of offer notes for sale. And it's gotten to the point, I remember the days where I was offering them to like friends and family for like a 30% rate of return for them. And then you calculate your discount on the note based on how much return the investor wants. Nowadays, that's kind of driven down to like the 16 to 20% range is kind of pretty typical. Um, so I try to hold as much as possible because I just love the cash flow. Then, believe it or not, when people stop paying me, turn around and usually sell it for more. Like we have one right now in Martin County, Texas. It was a 10-acre lot. I had it sold for $900 a month for 120 months to a guy named Eduardo, and he paid me over 20,000 on that piece of land. He's been paying on it for 2 or 3 years. Then he stopped making payments. We went to the county courthouse. I foreclosed him on the steps, and we just sent out the closing package on it today for 2,500 down and 1,000 a month for 120 months. So not only did Eduardo pay me like 20 G's over the last 2 or 3 years, but now instead of 900 a month, I'm selling it for 1,000 a month, and I'm getting a note receivable increase there on my balance sheet, basically.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Love that passive income cash flow, I'm sure. Now, let me ask you, I know that a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people talking about how risky it is to hold that many notes and that type of thing. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yep.
What do you answer? How do you answer those people that say, holding that many notes is way too risky? I would never do that.
Well, I say you have a problem on your buy side and not buying high quality land, because if I'm buying high quality land, I'm always confident that I can resell it at the same or higher of a price when someone defaults. And look, everyone talks about default rate and holding notes and interest rates and inflation and all that. The way I look at it is, in an inflationary market, the price of the land is actually increasing. So if anyone stops paying me, I'm going to be able to sell it for more. A default rate is going to vary based on your asset, of course. So that's another reason why I don't like desert squares, because default rate is so high. Now, there's actually a benefit to that for you beginners and folks who are starting off. It's basically an ATM machine. When someone defaults, as long as you have a good a desert square, it's basically an ATM where you turn around and sell it for the same or more. And if you got a 30% default rate, you're going to be making at least 30% more money on those desert squares. So there's actually a utility to that. But it gets to a point where you're running a big business, and that's more just like a logistical paperwork nightmare. And I'd prefer to do bigger, higher quality deals, because those notes also, if I ever want to sell them, is a higher quality asset, you're going to have to, you're not going to find many people want to buy Desert Square notes versus, an infill lot or something near Dallas, Fort Worth. That's a great quality piece of land. And, to those people who are nervous about holding that many notes, you got to get yourself also a decent network of note buyers. I probably got 3 or 4 guys who always hit me up. They want to buy more notes than I want to sell. So I was like, sorry, I don't got anything for you right now. So a good quality note buyer network, focus on land when you're buying it, the quality of land up front. That way, if people default, you can always turn around and resell it. And I guess this is almost, it ties into this. Try not to, back to the whole debt conversation. Your notes receivable to debt ratio needs to be in line. You can't just go and put on $10 million of debt and have only 5 million in notes receivable. I kind of like to think of like a 33% rule. So like the amount of debt I carry as a company, I try not to go over 33% of my total note receivable value. That way, in case an apocalypse happens and half the people stop paying me or whatever, then I can still feel comfortable that I'm going to be able to service all my debt.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Um, how do you go about finding your note buyers?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, Facebook groups and social media. A lot of people on social media. You can Google around as well, just like note buyers. There's a lot of big companies out there. But Facebook groups, local real estate meetups, there's a good note conference, a couple of them. Eddie Speed runs one, I think, in Dallas. At least he did it last year in Dallas. And then gosh, what's the other guy? There's a big note expo every year in Vegas. I can't remember the guy's name. He's like the guru of the note space. Hundreds, if not thousands, of note investors go to that thing. So those are good resources. I'll give a guys a couple off the top of, well, at least one off the top of my head. Steve Whitlock, American Equity Funding. Y'all should look him up. I've done business with him before. Bo Donahoe out of Austin, which is your neck of the woods. Those are a couple good guys. First National, they buy them. I get direct mail. If you have notes recorded, like people direct mail me like, hey, we see you have a deed of trust recorded in XYZ County. We're interested in buying your note. So you just got to pay attention, I guess. And again, build a spreadsheet and build them all up over time from all those different resources.
Yeah, the thing that I really love about the land space is that you really do depend on all of the different sort of players in the industry that you can come together and collaborate with to make things happen, right? And so I think that
Yeah.
that's a really cool component about the land game for sure. Um, you mentioned earlier about interest rates and inflation. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about where do you see the market going and how are you sort of hedging your bets against that so you can continue to be successful in the market shift?
Well, that's a great question. And I certainly take what I say with a grain of salt. I think everyone has their own opinion. I don't think anyone really knows what the heck is going on. I will say one thing though, the demand for land is at probably the highest it's ever been and is continuing to grow. I think inflation is not necessarily a good thing for any of us, but inflation, economic turmoil, societal unrest, all of those things bode well for land, less so for houses because inflation obviously creates a problem with cost of debt for houses. But in land, when I'm owner financing people, I mean, it's really been a non-factor for me because I offer a flat rate 7% on all my deals. I think view interest and stuff differently than some on owner financed deals. I actually bake my interest into my monthly advertised price. And so my interest never changed. When I owner finance somebody, I mean, I'm offering them in a different avenue than a bank, for instance. So as interest rates climb, banks are going to become harder to work with, but I'm going to become easier to work with. As interest rates climb, economic turmoil is going to be happening, but people want to move out to the land and get away from the city. So if things get real bad, then I think I almost feel comfort in like if things get real bad, then everyone's going to be so affected, including the land industry. Like I think the stuff I do is going to be some of the last stuff to go. I honestly believe that. Like multifamily, commercial, single family, I think is going to be before land. And so if things really implode and get nuclear in any of those facets of real estate, then of course land is going to be affected, but it's going to be a bigger problem for all of us. And at the same time, right now, what I'm basically trying to do is I'm trying to hold a little bit more cash, but really what I want to start doing is getting into like more gold and silver. And I kind of have been doing that. Just bought a gun recently and brand new AR, some ammo. So kind of trying to hold a little bit more cash, take on a little bit less debt, make sure that I'm really high grading my deals and taking it a little bit more slowly from there, a little bit less blowing and going, so to speak, and ramping up and craziness.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, I know owner finance, when you're selling on owner finance, you certainly open up your buyer pool. There are a lot more people that can afford down payments versus, large cash, large cash transactions. So, how are you finding your buyers for your properties? How are you dispoing your properties?
Yeah, that's a great question. And back to the note conference, it was Paper Source. Someone mentioned it. Paper Source in Vegas is the big note conference for the listeners out there. It's a great resource. Now, as far as how I find my buyers, I just opened up Facebook on my computer and I got another message. We're running a Facebook ad to Martin County land, the one I got a closing package sent out on today. So most of my stuff takes place on Facebook Marketplace. This piece of land is running really good. We're doing $100 a day ad spend on a Marketplace boost. Not enough people boosting on Marketplace or even posting on Marketplace. I think a lot of people post on Marketplace. They have all these VAs and crazy stuff and they're posting all this stuff on Marketplace, but they never run ads on Marketplace. So it's got to be ads on Marketplace, geo-targeted to either where the land is located or the nearest biggest city. This one's near Stanton, Texas. It's running at $4.55 per message, has reached 10,000 people. I've spent $131. So we got it sold. I hope I got it sold. I'm still waiting on down payment for the guy, but if not, it will sell within the next couple of days. So, we spent 100 or 200 in ads, call it, to sell this piece of land for 2,500 down and 1,000 a month for 120 months. Now, of course, I use Lands of Texas, Lands of America, the Lands Network as well. Don't see a whole lot of volume for the stuff I do on there. I don't focus a whole lot of time and energy on there, if I'm being honest. I know a lot of people have had success on there. My biggest thing with that is if you're using the Lands Network is to use that to build your email list. So anytime anyone emails you or whatever, kind of scrape that email, put it into your list, make sure to do it ethically, blah, blah, blah. But also we've been using a lot of pay per list MLS listings too. I never try to use realtors or brokers. For those of you out there who are realtors and brokers, if you follow me on social media, I give you all a hard time. They're just a lot less motivated to sell land. You will find some good ones. If you do find a good one, for sure, get them on your side and on your team. But I never try to offer exclusivity to realtors or brokers. If they want to deliver me a buyer, I have no problem giving them a 3% finder's fee. I like the pay per list MLS listing. We use Congress Realty. They're a pretty good service. We posted up, all the leads come directly to me or Brian, my ops manager. We handle the calls. That way you're not dealing with some realtor or listing agent who doesn't know where the land's located and all that stuff. So we actually get to talk to them. And so those are really the main avenues. Facebook is where I've had most success. I think most people know that. I have a lot. I talk a lot about Facebook Marketplace in particular. That's kind of like the hidden gem, the secret weapon for me, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Nice. So let's say someone's listening to this and their head's just kind of spinning about like, oh man, this is I definitely see the value in like getting, buying on terms, selling on terms, creating that note, but they have no idea how to structure that. What are some rules of thumb? How do you go about crafting your offers? And then how do you go about crafting what you're actually selling it for?
Yeah, good question. On the buy side, there's really one document. It depends on what state you're in. Texas is a deed of trust state, but either way, it's basically going to be one document on the buy side with the seller. In Texas, it's the deed of trust. And what you need to focus on in the deed of trust is removing the due on sale clause and allowing yourself the ability to sell or lease all or part of the land while you're paying that seller. You also want to ensure that they maintain first lien. And most importantly, the third clause in there, you want the ability to get a partial release. So require that seller to give you a partial release for a fraction of the land, call it 10 acres out of 100. When you sell it to Joe in the city and Joe wants his 10 acres close to a title company, he's going to give you cash. You need the ability to go to the underlying seller and write them 10 divided by 100. That's 1/10 of the remaining principal balance to get a partial release for Joe so he can get his land free and clear. So that's on the buy side. I like to focus on 10 to 20% down. That's just a numbers game. If the IRR and economics and the deal's good enough, I'll certainly go higher. I've yet to do a deal with 0% down. It's definitely possible. I've just never done it. You obviously want to give as little down as possible. People kind of get hung up on the interest rate. I usually offer 7% to my sellers. That's all negotiable. You could offer less, you could offer more. I've done them at 10%. But it's less about the interest rate, because what you'll find if you're running an IRR calculation, if you bumped your 7% interest to the seller up to like 15% interest, that's really not going to affect the IRR at all in the economic calculation. It's just kind of a minute calculation. What's way more important is the down payment you're giving them, because obviously money today is worth a lot more money in the future. So all day I would sacrifice a really high interest rate for a really low down payment. So that's kind of how I think about it on the buy side. Now on the sale side, it's pretty straightforward. It's a wraparound set of documents. Because we're creating wraps, we're wrapping the second lien into the underlying lien. And so it's just a special set of wraparound promissory note, wraparound deed of trust, wraparound warranty deed with vendor's lien, depending on your state, if it's a deed of trust or mortgage state. But any decent real estate attorney should be able to craft you a template document set. And that's kind of what you should be focused on, is finding a decent real estate attorney, tell them what you want to do. Really, the only difference in it is you're disclosing the underlying lien amount that you have with the original landowner, the seller in this case. And it's kind of funny because going into this, when I first learned about this and started doing it, I was like, man, some of these buyers are going to be concerned that I have like $1 million lien on the property for, the whole piece from the seller. And I think I've only lost like 4 or 5 potential buyers over the last few years doing this. I mean, and everyone seems to kind of glance over that or not ask questions or not care or whatever. And maybe it's a more of a facet of nowadays, most of our business is done with debt anyways. We're buying a house with a bank, we're buying a car with a bank under, underlying note on the asset. So I think people are kind of used to that. And the fact that I don't own a property free and clear, most times there's an underlying lien from the seller, doesn't scare people at all, basically, which I found surprising, but that, I guess that's just is the way it is.
Yeah. So, I thinking about a couple of things as you talk about that, and I'm wondering if this may even have a role in the fact that they don't care that there's a lien on it. What are you finding most of these people that are buying the properties? What are they doing with the properties? Are they going out and building on it? In a subdivision, obviously there is an intent to build and live there, but are they like, what's their time frame to do that? Are they just kind of like land banking and holding the money there?
So of course I've seen anything and everything from what people do with it. A lot of what I do is alternative housing. So mobile homes, barn dominiums, some simple built, site built homes or tiny homes. One guy recently built a barn dominium and a dirt bike track on his 10-acre lot. A lot of people won't do anything with their land right away, which I find kind of surprising. It's like, why are you buying it? They have these grandiose plans, but it either takes them a while or the plans don't go through or whatever. Probably 50% or so are doing things with the stuff I do, the subdivides outside of city limits. Like I said, a lot of mobile homes. It really just depends on the market. If I'm being honest, I like to keep people I work with and stuff too. I'm a big proponent of little to no restrictions. Basically, what I like to do is no commercial shooting ranges. That way there's not people out there shooting gun. They can have their own personal range, but they can't have other people come and pay them and be shooting a bunch of guns. So no commercial shooting ranges. and no junkyards. Now, the whole no junkyards thing can be kind of hard to actually enforce and come up with a definition. Someone really has to have a ton of crap out on their lot and actually get brought to the county commissioners or whoever is enforcing the stuff to actually have something done to them. So it's still going to allow people to store stuff and put stuff out there, but it's just going to keep it from getting out of hand. So that's a lot of what I deal with. Now, it depends on the project. If it's closer to, some fancy area or fancy city, you're going to want to consider, different livestock restrictions, different building restrictions, etc. People think that like adds value to the land, and it's like, okay, I can see that, but I actually like to make the argument that it devalues the land, because now you've created a smaller buyer pool, and you created like a situation where all someone can go out there and do is build like $1 million house. And it's like, most people actually don't want to do that. So now the demand for the land has actually fallen. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. I think livestock, people love having livestock. So I try not to restrict livestock. People love to have horses, goats, chickens, that type of stuff. So I guess that's how I think about it. I don't know. It depends on the project though. I've never done any $1 million house lots. That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, well, no, it does make sense. I mean, just taking into consideration what is the product like and what is the surrounding products around it like,
Yeah, and let's be honest, most people moving outside the city don't want to go out there to build $1 million home. They want to go out there to do something affordable and have their chickens and horses and goats. That just is the way it is.
exactly right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, when you are going through, let's talk about a little bit of acquisition. So when you're going through and looking for properties, I'm sure you've come across property, that is not 100% vacant. Like let's say it's, 300 acres and there's like a house on the property. So how do you calculate that house into the value? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, like the one I'm dealing with right now, where it's 150 acres and it's got that big, beautiful house on it, and the surrounding lots, I want to do basically no restrictions, no commercial shooting ranges, no junkyards. So when I go into a deal like that, I like to obviously have a heavy focus on the land itself, because I'm going in there, it's mainly for the land, to subdivide the land. That's where the main value is going to come. So I was talking to the listing agent or realtor out there, and he's like, this house is, probably worth 250 a square foot, like 800,000. I was like blown away. I was like, dang, I was thinking like 5 or 600,000. So I'm immediately slapping a pretty decent discount from what any real estate professional is going to actually think that improvement is worth, because I'm mainly focused on the land. I sell this land so quick. I know it's going to take probably a little bit longer to sell this big old house outside of city limits. It's going to take a very specific buyer with bank financing who's going to buy a 500,000-600,000 square foot house, or $1,000 house. So I
Right.
slap a pretty decent discount on any improvements, and mainly focus on the land. And I kind of value that land as if it's any other 100, 200, 300 acre piece in the area. And just the improvement is basically a bonus.
Got it. Got it. And are you finding people that, let's say that like in that particular scenario, they're living in the house right now, so that's their only home. And so, they kind of have this retail mindset of this is what I need to get for the house, move on to the next bit. But then you've got this, you're devaluing the house because you really just want the land. So how do you negotiate that when you're dealing with the seller?
Yeah, it's a good question. It just depends on the seller, I guess. Some are going to have emotional attachments or be a little bit more delusional than others. And at the end of the day, this is all a numbers game. I kind of always like to say, hey, this is obviously a very unique house or asset. This is not like a $500,000 house in the middle of the city where anyone's going to buy it and, whatever. This is actually coming with, 20 acres of land. It's further out of the city. You have to drive in, etc. So some people understand and some people don't. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. You can try and reason with them, but most won't be reasonable. If I'm being honest, I think right now there's still a huge disconnect. And it's funny, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about the disconnect right now is the price of the debt. Like a lot of these sellers are still hung up on, my asset's worth $1 million, but really it's probably worth, let's call it 700,000. And the difference there is the fact that they don't understand that the cost of debt on a $1 million asset now is, 6, 7, 8% versus 2 or 3%. a year ago, let's say. So there's a disconnect right now in the price of the debt, and most sellers are still delusional and think that their whatever it is worth $1 million when it's not, because I need to go get financing, and that's going to be more costly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a fantastic point. So when it comes to acquisitions, how are you doing marketing right now? Are you texting? Are you cold calling? Are you mailing? What does that look like?
So I've never really been big on texting. I know it's the big thing nowadays. I've never really done it. People who are having great success. I think that's awesome. I think it's definitely taking over in direct mail's place. I will admit that. Personally, I still do direct mail. But most of my deals actually come from the MLS. So I feel almost guilty saying this. I feel everyone is going towards SMS and direct mail still. And my whole thing is, when everyone starts going one way, I like to go the other. So everyone's going towards like SMS, cold calling, direct mail. I'm looking on the MLS, and that's basically how I'm finding all my big subdivisions. I'm doing one right now in Andrews County. Um, it's 350 acres, and she wanted 1,050,000, and we're under contract for 510K, and that's going to
Wow.
close in 90 to 120 days or so. I think it depends how much I want to extend it. It's probably going to be like a $2.5 million subdivision out there. So basically, what you'll offer on SMS or direct mail, to start offering it to people who are listing on MLS, because those are people who want and are trying to sell. If it's a bigger property, especially, it's probably not moving. It could be if it's priced right, but a lot of times the larger properties are illiquid. So I'll just go in and offer them something comparable to what I would direct mail, or in a lot of people's cases, text them, and the most they can say is no. And then I just move on to the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this whole idea of sourcing properties on market properties, very, very interesting. I know very few people actually do it. So can you talk a little bit about your process in terms of are you just making offers on every single property that's listed in the MLS? What's sort of like your criteria for properties? And then how do you go about making those offers?
So if I'm making an offer on a property in MLS, it's something that has caught my eye, probably location and just natural features as it is, probably has great access, or is priced pretty close to what I think is fair. And then what I'll do is kind of start a deep dive and like, okay, how do I think I'll break this out? How will I subdivide it? What will it actually take? And I'll actually base my offer on that. And what a lot of you guys can start doing is basically, you want to be doing like almost case studies for yourself on a lot of these projects. So you'll pick a property that you think looks interesting and is relatively fair, good looking online, wherever, near Austin. You're like, okay, this might be a potential Subdivide candidate. I'll actually bring that sucker into Google Earth. How will I break it down? I'll do like a quick 15. Now for me, it only takes like 15, 30 minutes. Sometimes I actually do it on my phone. I'll just pull up Google Maps and use measuring tool and what's the road frontage, how would I break it out, and just do like a quick little 15, 30-minute case study. And then how many lots of whatever size will I make? How much do I think those will sell for? And then kind of back into my offer price, which is, if it caught my eye, it's probably relatively close to what they've listed it for online. Because if it's some crazy price, as I'm basically, all I do is I scroll through Lands of America. Like, I'll just go to all my favorite counties. I'll just start scrolling through, and then whatever catches my eye, it's going to be close to what I think is a good price. It's probably still a little bit overpriced. I'll fire up like the case study. How do I think I can break this out? What will it actually take? Improvement costs. I got a quick economic calculation in my head of what I can sell it for. Okay, and then boom, this is what I think I need to be offering on it. And then if I kind of like what I'm seeing, I'll just kind of tie it all together and do like maybe a little bit deeper dive before actually making an offer, obviously. And then I'll just start reaching out. First thing I do is just call and see if it's still available. Then my first question is usually, will they entertain seller financing? And then I usually just prep a seller financing offer from there if I'm real serious about it.
Yeah, so that's really, really good. Now, let's say, you decide this is the property that I want to do. I want to make an offer on this property. There are not that many agents that are super familiar with a seller financing offer. So, how
Mhm.
do you talk to them about that in a way that they will understand, in a way that they will communicate that to their client, that doesn't necessarily just kill the deal right away?
Yeah, so most, that's a good question. Most are actually not familiar with it. So what I like to do is I actually like to craft up an email that has kind of a listed bullet points of like, okay, this is how much they're set to receive as a down payment. This is how much they're set to receive monthly, the interest breakout, how much interest they'll be making, what their principal price is. I like to explain to them kind of like the breakout we're talking about earlier, where they're always going to maintain first lien. Um, I'm going to pay them their down payment. That's not ever going to come back to me. They're always going to be able to keep that. There's actually a tax benefit for them. They're not going to be taking a tax hit all up front. They'll be taking it over time. And that's valuable to some people. They'll make extra money based on interest. And what I like to tell them is like, hey, look, your property's not selling. Obviously, it's been on the market for XYZ time. Let me see if I can get you a decent amount of cash in your pocket, start giving you monthly payments and cash flowing. And oh, by the way, you'll give me the ability to do partial releases. So I'll probably have you paid off sooner than 7, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever our note is, because I'll be selling some for cash and working with some investors and selling notes. So some people are just not going to understand it and just be completely closed off to it. And that's fine, because it's, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. But the main things, tax benefit to breaking it out, extra money from interest. Sometimes you can actually offer them pretty close to what they're asking, if not more, especially if you're only giving them like 10% down. So that can be attractive to some sellers. And then I always like to say, if you really want cash, I'm going to have to discount it pretty significantly, probably 20 to 30%. Or you can check out my seller financing offer. And good thing to do is also ask to speak directly to the landowner, because then I can explain it directly myself. Like that's when we went and saw this property a couple days ago with the house on it. I requested that the landowner be there, and so we had to do it at 4 o'clock instead of like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. She's like, "Oh, we can set it up and look at it." I'm like, okay, well, let's make sure the seller is there. He's like, oh, well, then we have to do it at 4 o'clock. So like, that's fine, because I actually want to talk to him and explain all these things instead of going through a third party. It's always going to be a disconnect of some kind.
Absolutely. No, I think that framework of actually laying it out in black and white where they can see, I think that's very, very smart. So
Send them the amortization chart too. Like I have a loan calculation spreadsheet. I send them that spreadsheet that breaks out their monthly payments.
that's really good. And so, do you send sort of these informal LOIs on every single property that you make an offer on? Like, is that sort of the process?
I don't think I've ever sent an LOI. What I do is just an email. That way they have it. I'll just be like, this is a formal offer, and I'll list out all the bullet points, include the ammo chart, and just see what they say. Then, if I actually still want to back out from there, I could, because that's not like a signed contract. From that
Right.
point, they're going to still have to prep the contract. I'm gonna have to look through that and make sure it all looks good with the seller financing addendum and the option period and the whole 9 yards. So it's more just an formal/informal email to either the landowner or the broker, realtor, whoever it is.
Got it. And so when you talk to the agents, I'm sure one of the questions they always ask is, okay, well, if we do the seller finance situation, how does that affect my commission? Can you talk about
Yeah,
that?
I'm not sure I ever got asked that, but they should get 3% of the total sales price, down payment plus principal, and that's going to come out of the sales price for the seller. So in this case, there's 500,000 down, 600,000 over 7 years or 10 years with a 3-year balloon. So that's $1.1 million purchase price. You don't include interest, down payment plus principal, 1.1 million. Let's say they're getting 6%. That's 66,000. That would come out of their 500K due at closing. Theoretically, if you gave them 0% down, they would have to come out of pocket to close. So that's probably why no one would ever accept 0% down if there's an agent involved. Now, if you're working directly with them as a landowner, then for sure, because there's no commissions involved, but it'll come out of the HUD and the closing amount.
Got it. So you're not actually coming out of pocket with this additional
Heck
commission.
no. I'd never want to pay commissions, because like I never want anyone representing me. It's like, I was actually, one of the questions I called the lady today. I'm like, so what are we gonna do about these commissions? Like, you trying to put me on the hook for 3% or half of it or what? She's like, oh no, it's gonna all come out of the sales price. I'm like, okay, good, because I don't need you representing me. I can do my own contracts.
Good answer, agent. Good answer.
Yeah.
So So you mentioned earlier that it is a numbers game. What are you seeing the numbers being? Like how many are you actually able to get under contract with this particular strategy in terms of a ratio of how many offers you're sending out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I have an exact number. I can tell you when we do direct mail, we'll send out like 3, 4, 500 at a time, not a lot. And we usually get a couple of offers or a couple accepted offers back. So I'd say probably somewhere around 1%. Now when I'm offering online to like ones that are listed on the MLS, it's probably a lot higher than 1%. Actually, that's probably like 10%. If I had to guess off the top of my head, because a lot of these properties aren't moving. And so I hate to say that they're desperate, but it's providing them an avenue to actually get their asset sold. So I've actually had a lot of success doing it with pieces online.
That's great. That's great. And so you mentioned, a few hundred mail pieces. How much mail are you sending out a month?
I do very little direct mail, probably will probably mail out only a few thousand a year. So call it 2 or 300 a month. Um, and we kind of do it very uniquely. We pull up the GIS map a lot of times and actually scrape the data manually. Either I'll do it or a lot of times Brian does it, my ops manager. So he'll scrape and we come up with a value that we want to apply to each property. So if it has a longer road front, it'll be higher offer. If it has no road frontage, it'll be a lower offer. As a flood zone, it'll be lower, whatever. And so we create these very small, concise data lists of just a few hundred data points, then mail those out with just, a direct mail service. A lot of times, actually, we still hand stuff them. I'll put a dollar bill in the envelope. I've been doing a lot of that recently.
Nice. Very, very good. Nice. So, how long are you finding the life cycle of these deals to be? From the time you
Yeah.
get them under contract to the time you're able to close on the sell side to the time you can subdivide them and then start creating notes on those.
So from contract to actual sales of land, probably 60 to 90 days, pretty quick. I'll actually start pre-sales before I officially close the lot, and a lot of times. Um, 60, call it 60 to 120 days. It really just depends on the project, but it's pretty quick. Now, I was thinking more in terms of life cycle as well, because I was working with a seller today. We're trying to create a creative seller financing structure. And he's like, okay, you're offering me this 7-year note. Is it actually going to take 7 years for you to pay me off on my seller financing note? And believe it or not, I've never had one go the entire term yet. Now, I haven't been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years. I've been doing it for probably 3 or 4, and I have a lot of 7 and 10 year notes, but most of those have all been paid off within 2 to 3 years is a pretty good average. Call it 3 years because I'm either selling the notes to investors, selling part of the lots for cash, or it could be any other variable that's causing it to not go the whole length of term with the seller. So for people who aren't, that's another good negotiating tactic, I guess, for those who are a little bit hesitant, like, oh, I don't want to wait 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Well, those partial releases and that clause usually gets it done in, call it 3 years. So but this stuff on the buy side, when you buy it and then to where I actually get to sales, like this Andrews County one, I think the closing date is like September 15th. And I've just drug it along because it's CRP land and we have to wait for that CRP contract to expire. Otherwise, we have to buy it out and it's a 10-year contract. That's like 100 G's. So we don't want to do that. So that's the only reason why that one's like going to take 120 or 150 days. But as it gets closer, we'll ramp up test water wells. And once we have that, once we have basically our prelim plat that's set to go and basically approved by the county and going before the commissioner's court, I'll start sales. And that'll be actually before I buy the land and give her money for the piece.
Wow, very good. Yeah, that's nice to have a built-in buyers before you can even close with the first side of the transaction. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, and I have a guy here today who's messaging me. He's like, oh, I already sold one of my lots before I'm buying the land. I'm like, okay. He's like, what do I need to do for this? Usually it's just a closing statement that I have on the sale side. And I put like a little subject to line in there and just says subject to, and it'll be like Jazzland closing the property, I'll word it nicely, Jazzland closing property, otherwise 100% refundable down payment. I'll have them give me the down payment. And if I don't end up buying the land for whatever reason, which it's probably not going to happen if I'm opening up pre-sales. Then they feel comfortable that I'm going to refund their money.
Very cool. Yeah, wow, that's really, really good stuff. So, what are your main deal breakers when looking at properties? Like, so when you're looking to acquire properties, like what are the things that when you see you're like, nope, this is not for me. I'm not going to deal with this type of deal.
Yeah, so on the projects I'm working now with these subdivisions and everything, a lot of it comes down to the county regulations and the roads. If they're going to make me do a paved road, I've yet to do a paved road project just because you're looking at like at least $150 per linear foot, as opposed to if they let me do a dirt road, it's like $20, give or take, let's say, close estimate. So it's like at least 7x to do a paved road. So paved roads, usually a hard no. Water, I've sold dry land, but it can become difficult. So it's usually roads, water. If there's no water line, if you can't drill a well, if it's going to be dry. Um, so those two, I'd say, are right at the very top of the list. Of course, price is the main thing. If I could get the land for $1 per acre and it's dry land, and I have to do some crazy road, I'm probably still going to buy it, 'cause I buy it for $1 per acre, and even if I had to put in $500,000 in improvements, I can still probably make a couple $1 million on it. So price is always going to be like the number one thing, but it's really paved roads and water, I'd say.
Nice, very good. And so what is your when you're looking for size, like what's the size range? I know you probably don't have a maximum, but what's
Yeah.
the minimum that you're looking for when you're looking to do these types of deals?
So I've done them as small as we did one at 16 acres, one at 18 acres, and I've done 465 acres. So, I mean, it's probably 30, 40, 50 acres at least. That way you can do some solid 5 or 10 acre lots in there. But it really depends. I mean, you can go as if there's a perfect rectangle and it's a 10-acre lot, and it's 300 foot deep and it has a road along the long side. You could do 10 1-acre lots there that are 300 foot deep and do basically a minor subdivision. So it's real. I've never done anything under 10 acres, so maybe I should say at least 10 acres, but probably 40, 50 acres is at least is a good ballpark. And yeah, I don't have any limit on the upper side because you can always do bigger tracks on the sale side. You could always go 40, 50, 100 acre ranches if the numbers work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so do you have some type of like economic factor where you won't touch a deal if it doesn't make at least X amount? Like
Yep.
what's your profit margin?
Yeah, that's the main thing that drives it all. It's the 100% IRR number. So internal rate of return that takes into account time value of money. So the bigger down payment you can get, your IRR is going to go up. Um, the higher monthly payments you can get, your IRR will go up. The more cash sales you get, your IRR is going to go up. If you sell notes, it'll drive that number up. But it has to be at least 100% internal rate of return. Very different from ROI. A lot of investors get that confused. I'm not, if I bought a $500,000 piece of land and it's going to take me 10 years to make $1 million, and my ROI is going to be 100%, but it took me 10 years to do it, my IRR on that deal is probably 4 or 5%. It's probably pretty crappy. So that's number one. There's still a great site out there. I give it out all the time. It's financial dash calculators. It's like / IRR calculator or something like that. They've changed to, I think, accurate calculators. Either they changed the URL or someone bought it out. It does an automatic URL redirect. So, I mean, you can Google around and find it. If you just Google accurate calculators, IRR calculator, the financial dash calculators, IRR calculator, that's the exact calculator I use for all my deals. You got to make sure it has a monthly input, allows you to put in both positive and negative values. IRR and yield changes by the day. So you need to get as granular as possible. A monthly level is pretty common and pretty good, but a lot of those free calculators only do it by the year. So you don't know if you're getting your money back month 1, month 3, month 8. It only does it by the year. So make sure you have a monthly breakout.
That's really good. That's really good. What are the most important needle moving action items to take daily as a newbie, in your opinion?
Deal flow is probably the main thing. So looking for deals, sending out direct mail or texting, talking to people. I think picking up the phone is underrated. I used to spend a crap load of time on the phone when I was starting off. Like it seemed like the more I was talking to counties, realtors, other investors, the more my business would grow. So picking up the phone, talking to people, and deal flow, because if you can get deal flow as a beginner, you can probably always find someone to fund your deal. If you have good deals, you go to Facebook groups, you can assign them, you can wholesale them, you can have other people fund them. So as long as you have deal flow, you're going to make money, and then your business is going to be growing.
That's great. Are you using AI in your business right now?
Not my land business, but in my personal brand business and courses and all that, we are. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. What is your favorite sort of AI hack that you've found so far?
Favorite AI hack. The ability to talk to people and somehow intelligently answer questions and have almost, it's not quite a seamless conversation, but it's almost like, you give it inputs with parameters. Someone hits me up, hey, can I do a call? Or, how much is your course or whatever? And it just seamlessly redirects them into different buckets, gives them different answers. So I'm full disclosure, I'm still kind of a beginner to AI and all this stuff, but it's obviously insanely powerful if you can somehow fire it up to have conversations with leads and intelligently push them in the right direction. What they're wanting to do with land, how much they can spend, etc., and kind of push them towards a piece of land that works for them, or warm them up as a lead so that you or whoever is the business operator can actually get on the phone and talk to them from there.
Yeah, that's great. I think that AI is going to be it is a super powerful tool. And I'm really excited to see how entrepreneurs are going to start using it, especially in the land space. I think that there are some really cool things that are on the horizon.
Dude, it's scary. I don't know, man. We'll see how it goes, but
Yeah,
I mean, for those of you who know me and kind of know my beliefs and background and stuff, I mean, I don't know. I'm interested to see how it goes, but it's definitely scaring me. Well, but you can't hate the player, or you can't, don't hate the player, hate the game, so to speak. This is what we're all living by. It's whether you believe in it or don't believe in it or whatever. It's like, this is what's being done. This is what's being used. So you can hate on AI or whatever it is, you can hate on it, but that's the rules. That's what the society we live in. It just is the way it is.
sure. Your competitors will be using it in some way. So,
Exactly.
you know, um, very cool. So, something I'm really interested to hear from you is, in your opinion, what is something that no one is talking about in the land industry that we all should be talking about right now?
Mm, Probably, I don't see much talk about creative financing. So buying with creative financing. Um, One thing I'm interested in is like selling more notes and how to create. Clint has actually kind of turned me on to this and talked about this, creating almost like liquidity pools to sell your notes. So it allows you to raise more money. But probably creative finance, man. No one really is doing the wrap notes as far as I know of, or at least teaching it. It's a super powerful tool. You should be mailing or SMSing your same list a seller financed offer. So probably that creative financing, it's more of like a house thing, like sub 2 and all that, but it's super useful in land.
Absolutely. So, speaking of Sub 2, um, what are your favorite business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers in the business space? Who do you follow? Who do you like?
Grant Cardone, Brad Lee, Dropping Bombs is probably my favorite podcast right now. Cody Sperber is a great real estate guy. Grant's obviously a real estate guy too. Um, so those folks. I have a personal mentor, Mike Mitchell. He's not really on social media or anything like that, but he's been a huge help to me. Let's see who else. Those are probably my favorite. Pace Morby has a great group for sub 2 and creative financing. But yeah, I've been really into Brad Lee recently. I don't know if you know who that is. I love
Yeah,
Brad.
yeah. He has a great podcast.
Yep.
Great podcast. Yeah, for sure.
You also listen to his podcast with Cody Sperber. I think it's probably a year or two old. That's a real good one. He has a good one with Pace Morby as well. Talks a lot about subject 2 and creative finance.
That's really, really good. I always think that there's so much that we can borrow from different, just from different niches in the industry. Seeing people apply wholesaling principles to land, like that was not something that was done, very long ago. And so it's just very interesting to see how different creative financing tools are starting to come over to the land side. And I think that whenever you have sort of a larger tool belt to work from, you can really get some amazing stuff done for sure.
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
what would you consider to be your superpower?
My superpower. Oh man. Um, I can focus really well, and I learn really quickly. I think that's probably my biggest superpower is like the ability to learn quick. Now, one of the main things, and probably maybe the single best thing you can do, is be a continual learner. So that means podcasts, books, hopping on calls like this. If you can learn quickly, obviously you can kind of recycle and go through more podcasts, books, etc. more quickly. But if you learn more slowly, that's fine, because let's be honest, 99% of the population are not on calls like this. They're not reading a book a week, or, even a book a month, even a book a year. So continual learning is huge. If you're a naturally quick learner, that's obviously a huge bonus, but just doing small little things like hopping on this call or reading a book is going to put you exponentially ahead of others.
Absolutely, constantly growing. That is so good. What's the biggest surprise you've had so far in your journey in the land space?
Mm, biggest surprise. I guess how big I've been able to grow my business without having to hire a bunch of employees. I have one full-time employee. It took me forever to hire him. I was very much like, I don't want employees, or a big team or whatever. But now my company is growing. I'm probably going to need even more people here in a very short order. But for those of you out there as beginners, I think a lot of people get very hung up on outsourcing, finding VAs, kind of stepping away from their business. I found success in doing the complete opposite. And it's funny, a good mentor of mine kind of turned me on to this. He's like, you should really have one or two people, think of it as like a bench press, or on like either side of the dumbbell, like helping you lift this 500-pound bench press, as opposed to all these, especially land beginners. I know this is talked about a lot in the land community. It's not a fan of it, honestly. Is like you're outsourcing your calls, your leads to VAs, and they're scrubbing data for you and they're handling everything. It's like, of course, if you get to a certain point in your business, you're gonna need people helping you, but you should really, obviously you can't delegate what you don't know. So never delegate what you don't know. You should become basically a master in all things. Like I still run not all my, but a lot of my Facebook ads, post a lot of stuff still, handle calls from leads, buyers. Like I'm still not even 100% out of my own business where it's at. So I'd say focus less on delegating, and the more work you can put in yourself and learn everything, it's going to be exponential gains in your business.
That is really, really good. That's really good. And that's not something that very many people are talking about either. So,
No,
um,
because it's the whole craze, like AI and VAs and people in the Philippines and all that. It's like, guys, I'm telling you, the best thing I did was hire a full-time employee who works exclusively for me. I even help him do his own deals and stuff on the side. Like we don't even have a non-compete or anything. It's like he works for me. He comes out to Cornutus and helps me. He preps closing packages. Like we talk every day back and forth. And it's like, you know, the value that he adds, as opposed to if I was trying to use a VA or someone in the Philippines or whatever for that, is just, it's exponential and well worth the money. So,
that's really good advice. That's really good. So, what's your biggest passion or goal you'd like to achieve at this point in your life?
man, these are all great questions, making me think deep over here. Right now, my whole thing is to become the most known, respected person in the land space. So that's kind of what I've been hyper focused on, like the Grant Cardone of land, or the Gary Vee of land, or the Elon Musk of land, whatever you want to call it. So, I've been kind of embracing the grind mode, I guess. I've been doing a lot more work, focusing on personal brand, doing more content. Obviously, I have the group, the course, the town, bought Cornutus, as, obviously it's really a thing that fascinated me, but it was obviously partially for like a publicity thing. Like I've been in newspapers, we're in discussions to do a TV show with it. and stuff like that. So it's kind of to become the known person in land. I guess it's kind of, it sounds weird to say, it almost might sound like vanity or like selfish or something to say, but I mean, people have different motivations. I've never been like super fascinated by the money. My goal, I guess, I do have a goal to become 100 millionaire. Like I think I could do $100 million land business, but I'd say that less caring about the actual money of the business, but more about, I feel like the respect $100 million land business would give me as like the most known person in land. So whether, some people motivation is money, material things, status, it just depends. Everyone's different. I think the
Yeah.
best thing you can do is just be honest about it.
Yeah, embrace who you are and do your thing for sure. So one of the things that I was just really interested and intrigued about is this you buying this town. Like when I first heard about it, I was like, so this is basically this is like a true Schitt's Creek type situation where you're buying your own town. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you came about that, and what do you want to do with that?
Yeah, everyone's been telling me to watch Schitt's Creek, and have I seen it? I actually haven't seen it. I gotta watch it apparently. But it's Hudspeth County, man. So we all know Hudspeth County. I think that's kind of where I started. I saw this. It was posted on Facebook early 2022, and uh, I didn't want to buy it because it's in the middle of nowhere. I was like, how the hell am I actually gonna manage and do this? And then kind of just time went on, late 2022, and I just had this mindset shift of like, okay, I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna embrace it. I think it'll be great for my brand, for everything. It'll be fun, be good tax advantages. So I was like, why not? And so January 14th, I think the date says on the deed, is when I bought Cornudas. It's 28 acres, Cornudas, Texas, about an hour east of El Paso. It's got the cafe, the 6-bed motel, 6-spot RV park, 3 mobile homes on it. And the goal is just to really build it up as like the destination spot of the area. People go out there, stay there, have burgers there. They're super famous for the Cornudas burger, green chili burger. Add more short-term lodging. So we're out there pretty much every other week working on it. Just did roofing last week. We had to put in air conditioners. We still have to do that. Get furniture. Bought $5,000 worth of mattresses, and half of them didn't inflate the foam mattresses. Like it's always something. So.
Yeah, that's incredibly cool though. I mean, I can imagine sort of like the economic injection that's going on in that area, just from the business that you're bringing in. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, that's sort of the goal with it. We had the congressman's office out there interested in the same thing, like what are the economic potential of this area? So I think the sky's the limit. We've been back and forth like multiple different, call them production companies, I guess, for like some sort of TV show concept with it. But it's a lot of work, man. It's 8.5 hours from DFW, so it's traveling there and back, and obviously still running my business. There's not that many people out there to help. We got one guy who's a awesome handyman, Jeff, and he's like one of those guys who fixes everything and anything. So he's a big help.
I bet you keep Jeff busy.
Oh yeah, he's out there every single day, even when I'm not there.
Man, an entire town. That is absolutely incredible. So before we wrap it up, I do want to ask if you could go back and teach your younger self 3 pieces of advice, what would you say as a
Hmm.
newbie to yourself?
3 pieces of advice. One, think bigger and go bigger sooner. I definitely wish I would have utilized more private money and people to help me fund deals and everything. Basically, everything I bought in the beginning was my own capital, but I think I could have gone a lot bigger, a lot quicker. Um, be a continual learner. We already talked about that. I actually never really read a book in college other than just a textbook or like what was required for class. It wasn't until I graduated, I don't know why I started reading. Something clicked in my head where I was like, I should start reading and looking up business owners and podcasts and stuff. So I don't know, I was pretty hard-headed before that. Just thought I was going to go to college and get a degree and live happily ever after. And, you know, so that was a big mindset shift. And um the third one, I think I always used to be pretty introverted. So to force yourself into uncomfortable situations, and for you introverts out there and people who are not as good with people or get uncomfortable in crowds, or, I used to be scared like crazy going to a conference by myself or whatever, like go to a Tony Robbins event by myself or Grant's of Cardone's event by myself. And it's like, but as time grew on, now most people think I'm extroverted, but I'm definitely not. Definitely introverted. I've just put myself in enough uncomfortable situations that you force yourself to grow. And it's definitely not easy, especially at the start, but it gets a whole lot easier the more that you do it.
That's really good. That is really, really good stuff. So, I just want to thank you so much for giving to us today. You've been so generous. How can we give back to you right now? Are there any resources or connections you're currently looking for that we can help with?
Uh, well, I'm always looking for more note buyers, more land funders, um, people who can help me grow my network and get my name out there. Can be found basically on any social media. I answer all DMs, emails, anything. So if any of you guys ever have deals, I won't fund the deals because I need funding myself, but I'll certainly look at them for you. For anyone on this call or listening to this, you want to shoot me a DM at Jon Jasniak, Instagram, or any other social media at Jon Jasniak. I'll look at your deals. I'll offer free advice as much as I can. I just love looking at deals, but yeah, I appreciate you having me on here, man. It's been a great talk. I hope people got value out of this, and I enjoyed it.
Jon, thank you again. This has been absolutely incredible. If you would like to check out our podcast, the link is there in the chat. Also, if you want to join us on Facebook in our Facebook group, you can go to onlylandfans.com. Again, that's onlylandfans.com. We have our YouTube channel up there if you want to check out the video podcast as well. Jon, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us and asking incredible questions. It was great to meet everyone here and collaborate, and looking forward to catching you in the future. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. If you're interested in hearing from other 6- and 7-figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, OnlyLandFans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.